the council meeting for the 23rd of June 2020, which I now declare open. Although it's not possible for members of the public to join us in person tonight, our meetings remain open to the public via the live stream on our website, and I extend a warm welcome to those who are watching. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the land on which Moonee Valley is located, that of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Councillor Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Now, councillors, I have received a couple of apologies for tonight from Councillor Cusack and Councillor Lawrence. Can I please have a motion that the apologies from Councillor Cusack and Councillor Lawrence be noted? Move Councillor Gachamarici. Seconded Councillor Nation, and I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday the 9th of June and Thursday the 11th of June 2020 be confirmed? Moved Councillor Sypak, seconded Councillor Nation, and I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Now, councillors, does anyone wish to declare a conflict on any item on the agenda this evening? Nope. Beautiful. Now, we are up to the item on the agenda for presentation. So I'd like to acknowledge that from the 14th to the 20th of June was Refugee Week, with the theme Celebrating the Year of Welcome. Council was very pleased to celebrate our refugee and people seeking asylum communities and the many contributions they have made to our cultural, social and economic lives. Now, as portfolio holder, I believe, Councillor Nation, you are going to say a few words.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor. So on behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I'm proud to help celebrate Refugee Week, Australia's peak annual activity to inform the public about refugees and celebrate the positive contributions made by refugees to Australian society. Refugee Week provides a platform where positive images of refugees can be promoted in order to create a welcoming culture throughout the country. The ultimate aim of the celebration is to create better understanding between different communities and to encourage successful integration, enabling refugees to live safely and to continue making a valuable contribution to Australia. Refugee Week is a unique opportunity for all of us to experience and celebrate the rich diversity of refugee communities. And this year, obviously last week, events had to move online, and that will hopefully give many members of our community the opportunity to learn about, engage with, and support our refugee populations. So in our city, the most recent data shows we currently have 131 Moonee Valley residents from a refugee background, with the largest number, 57 of them, residing in Avondale Heights. However, we really all are immigrants, bar the Indigenous population, yet sometimes our society seems to cast aspersions on the legitimacy of those who have recently arrived in our country. Refugee Week aims to challenge that notion, to acknowledge we're all equal, and to celebrate the amazing diversity of cultures that make up modern day Australia. I will now read Council's formal statement acknowledging Refugee Week. Council was thrilled to be celebrating our refugee and people seeking asylum communities and the many contributions they have made to our cultural, social and economic lives. Sadly, human rights violations and persecutions continue to exist. Refugee Week served as an opportunity to consider the ongoing challenges facing refugees and people seeking asylum in many parts of the world. We live, work and play on the lands of the oldest living culture known to the world, and we honour this privilege and responsibility with respect, humility and curiosity. Since the traditional owners first inhabited the land, Moonee Valley's cultural diversity has continued to evolve and shape our identity. And though we may have different cultural backgrounds, when we share our stories with one another, we find common humanity. Every refugee and asylum seeker brings their own story of why they left home, their journey, and in some cases, finding safety in Australia. Sharing stories is a chance to remember and honouring the journeys, as well as creating a deeper connection as we walk together in solidarity in the shared pain of the past and shared hope for the future. Our greatest strength is our diversity, and Moonee Valley City Council looks forward to identifying where our further efforts can be directed towards creating a welcoming and inclusive city. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Very well spoken as always. Thank you. Now on the agenda, we are up to petitions and joint letters, and I do believe we have one petition being tabled tonight.
Yes, we do. And I have a petition that has been received by Council with 1,853 signatures, requesting Council to amend the Green Action Plan to include, fund and action interim science-based community emissions reductions targets of 50% reduction by 2025 and 75% reduction by 2030. And that's in order to meet MBCC's target of zero net emissions for our community by 2040, respond with urgency required in line with the Climate Emergency Declaration and support the Paris Agreement. So, Mayor, I'd like to move that Council resolves to 1, note and receive the online petition to amend the Green Action Plan targets to include the interim community emissions targets, 2, refer this matter to the Group Manager planning for investigation and reporting back to Council, and 3, advise the petition organiser accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Sypek. And I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. We now come to public questions, and we have received questions from 2 members of the community for tonight's meeting. As we do not have residents in the public gallery, I propose that we move to suspend the provisions in our meeting procedure protocol, which requires the questioners to be present in the gallery. That will enable me to read the questions that have been submitted in advance and ask CEO Brian Lancaster to read the responses. Councillors, can I please have a mover that the Council resolves to suspend the public question provisions in its meeting procedure protocol to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and answered by the CEO for this meeting? Move Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Sorais. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Okay, so the first 2 questions tonight are from Meredith Anderson. Thank you, Meredith, for your questions. So Meredith's first question reads, Moonee Valley City Council has recently completed significant capital works at Strathnaver Reserve consisting of a car park expansion from 12 to 44 spaces, concrete pathways linking local streets, the said car park, lighting and landscaping. The budgeted costs for this project were publicly communicated by MBCC as circa $900,000 with a projected timeframe of 5 months. The project timeframe took greater than 12 months to complete, with local residents experiencing personal property damage, open space damage, dumped rubbish and noise. Further, residents of Mascoma Street and nearby streets were not consulted or notified of said project until commencement date. Given the significant timeline overrun and anecdotal reports of each car park costing $55,000 or a total of $2.42 million, we ask MBCC to confirm today a final detailed costs against budget line by line of this project. Again, they were from Meredith Anderson in her words, and I'll ask the CEO Brian Lancaster to please respond.
Thank you, Mayor. The Strathnaver Reserve Master Plan shows the area under consideration as a new asphalt car park with approximately 40 bays. Prior to the recently completed works, there were 14 parking bays. There are now 44 bays. Consultation was undertaken with a tenant club, but I'm advised that no additional consultation was undertaken on the detailed design of the car park expansion, as it was endorsed in the original master plan. Budding residents were notified of the changes to the path works during the project. On 14th May 2019, Council approved variations to the path and provisions of a fence on top of the gabion wall supporting a car park, thereby increasing the total budget to $965,000 for the project. The actual cost of $998,000 was 3.4% above the final adjusted budget. Council officers are not aware of any property damage. The leftover concrete matter has been resolved with the resident that raised the concern. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Meredith's second question reads, further to question 1, we ask MVCC to explain the factors causing such significant time and budget overruns and why significant variation costs were not rebudgeted and made public to local residents given the impacts to personal and property noted above. Thank you, Mr. Lancaster.
Thank you, Mayor. The projected timeframe of 5 months did extend beyond 12 months due to the construction of the gabion walls, as well as a redesign and construction of the path and stairs. The gabion walls were a major part of the project, which were initially programmed by the contractor to take a much lesser timeframe. This part of the works took more than 6 months to be completed by his subcontractor. The question about the variation was answered previously. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster, and thank you, Meredith, for your questions. The next 2 questions are from Rose Isa. Thank you, Rose, for your questions. Rose's first question reads, in last year's public budget papers, a long-term capital works plan to 2044 to 45 was included and adopted by Council. A similar attachment hasn't been included this year despite changes to the financial position of MVCC. What are the reasons for the plan not being part of this year's budget, and what is the status of the long-term capital works plan adopted 12 months ago? And again, I will ask the CEO, Brian Lancaster, to please respond.
Thank you, Mayor. It's not obligatory for Council to approve a capital works program beyond the 2021 financial year. However, a strategic resource plan does indicate an expected capital works amount for a 4-year period to accord with the financial plan. The long-term capital works plan was developed as part of planning for delivery of the Moonee Valley 2040 vision, as well as the developer contributions plan. The long-term capital works plan, as endorsed in June 29, is a guiding reference document, for future capital works to meet this vision and the commitments associated with developer contributions. There are many uncertainties that we are dealing with at the present time, including but not limited to the implications of COVID-19, the impact of a reduced rate cap, the inability of industry to deliver projects, particularly in the short to medium term. To sustain the previously adopted program level, I've decided that it is now necessary to review the long-term capital works plan to 2045 to prioritise our expenditure to meet community needs in a rapidly changing environment. We're currently working to determine the capacity to deliver capital works, both in terms of estimated costs and refining the scope of projects in the shorter term, starting with the immediate years beyond 2021 and then the longer term capital works program. And we'll present a report to Council at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Rose Isa's second question reads, on page 10 of attachment A to the budget, the service area environment appears under beautiful, not green. What's the reason behind this? Thank you, Brian Lancaster, for you responding.
Thank you again, Mayor. The environment team undertakes a number of activities as part of the services delivery that sit under both beautiful and green. The structure of the budget forces us to put services under a particular theme. However, many services have multiple objectives that could contribute to thriving, beautiful or green. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster, for the responses to the questions, and thank you again to Meredith and Rose for submitting questions. Now, the next item on the agenda is the reports from special committees, and I don't believe we have any tonight. So we will move on to item 10.1, which is the budget 2020-2021. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Oh, yep.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yep.
I would like to move a motion that I need to read out. It is not the officer's motion. So the proposed motion is that Council resolves to 1A, adopt the annual budget 2021 provided as Appendix A, noting the following key amendments. Add 550,000 for the annual renewal of library books, split across capital and operating as follows: 450,000 for physical books, 100,000 for additional e-book licensing. Add 460,000 for road renewal projects for York Street Airport West, Collins Street Essendon and Brixton Street Flemington. These projects are fully funded from additional roads to recovery funding received in 1920. Point B, adopt the Strategic Resource Plan 2021 to 2023-24 as per Appendix B. Point 2, instruct the CEO to arrange for a small community grant up to $5,000 for the Italian pensioners of Essendon for the 2021 financial year to be funded through existing operational budget within community development, and that this is conditional on the understanding that any future grants funding must be applied through the Partnerships Grants program. Point 3, refer suggestions made at the Budget Submissions Committee meeting in relation to climate change and disability access onto the relevant advisory committees, and then consider any recommendations by these committees at the mid-year budget review. Point 4, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to give public notice of this decision in accordance with Section 129 of the Local Government Act 1989. Point 5, respond to those who lodged a submission on the proposed budget 2021 in writing advising of Council's decision and the reason for the decision in accordance with Section 221D of the Local Government Act 1989. Point 6, grant a rebate in relation to rates and charges to all Moonee Valley residents eligible within the meaning of the State Concessions Act 1986. The maximum rebate is $20. And point 7, advise the VLGA in writing that it is withdrawing its membership and redirects the savings from the budget to COVID-19 recovery items related to the delivery of the Green Action Plan.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Our budget is obviously an annual process, and it is often a very gruelling task that we as councillors all undertake. I think this budget would have to be one of our most difficult to achieve, and I thank our officers behind the scenes who work very hard to get all the information to us. Due to the impact of COVID-19, this budget has pretty much had to be scaled back to the bones to ensure that we remain financially sustainable, but more importantly, to ensure that we can provide for our residents, community groups, sporting clubs, artists and businesses throughout these incredibly challenging times. The benefit we have in Moonee Valley is that we as a council have no to very little debt, and as such we've been able to provide support to many through our hardship policy. I'd like to acknowledge the budget submissions that we received. We did receive quite a few this year. Unfortunately, our budget could not be altered to include all of these submissions. As you can imagine, we currently have incredibly tight financial constraints. But we did receive a lot of feedback regarding library funding that was in our draft budget proposed to be cut because we weren't entirely sure even when our libraries were going to open. But you know, we're looking at an environment that is changing on a daily, weekly basis. And at the moment, our libraries have reopened to small numbers. So I'm very pleased that we've been able to include the amounts for libraries back into the budget. And as library and learning portfolio holder, I'm certainly very well aware of the value that our residents place in our libraries. And this was certainly proven by the amount of feedback we received just on this one very issue. So I thank you for all that feedback. I should make note that we're also always looking at where we spend our money, how we spend our money, and I guess just touching on point 7 regarding the VLGA, it's a membership organisation that we've been associated with for a long time, but we've just, in the situation that we're in and the tight constraints that we have, it has been suggested that our membership for this gets diverted to the delivery of the Green Action Plan, which I think is a fantastic initiative, and I'm sure Councillor Nation would like to talk on that because it was Councillor Nation's idea to put that up. I think that it can only benefit our residents, 0.7. So I'm certainly happy to include that and move it as I have. So I hope other councillors see fit to endorse the budget. We can be very proud of the hard work that we've done as a group, as a councillor group, on this budget. And again, thank the officers for their
Councillor Sharp, I think you were just muted for that last sentence. If you wanted to re-say that last sentence.
this silly computer. I don't know what I was up to. Did I talk about, did you hear me talking about?
You were just saying thank you to the staff, I think you were trying to say.
Okay. Just saying thank you to the staff for all their hard work behind the scenes that help us along on this journey. So
absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. So council elected to go through the budget process now rather than defer it, which was an option that was available to us. And I probably have some mixed feelings about that, but understand why we've decided to proceed now, and was willing to support that on the basis that we do have that full budget review in January 2021, when we have a much greater understanding of the full impacts of COVID-19 on the budget. It's stating the obvious to say this is a great time, a time of great uncertainty. And as you look at the various predictions and indicators, we have cause to be concerned, and we have cause to be cautious too. That combination of a reduced rate cap, a range of other factors, and the impact of COVID-19 on our budget has been significant. It's a budget that, as Councillor Sharp referred to, has very much been pared back from when we first commenced this process, and these budget processes do commence a fair way out. And we've had to take steps to make sure that this organisation is financially viable in the short, medium and long term. Councillor Sharp touched on the issue of library funding, and I think when we put the draft budget out, we only all agreed for it to be put out on the basis that if the libraries had reopened, that library funding would be reinstated. So I certainly thank everyone who made a submission in that regard, but I think we were all very clear as to what would happen, and we're very pleased that our libraries have opened, and they've certainly shown their value in really challenging times, and will continue to do so. Some of the submissions we just weren't able to accommodate, and that's for a range of reasons. We've referred, as is indicated in the motion, a number of the other submissions onto the relevant portfolio advisory committees, and that's the climate change and disability access submissions. In relation to the climate change requests, some of the things requested, so we're sort of moving with some of them. Council has tried various things over the past few years, and probably some of them have had limited success. So we need to continue to look at our options that way. With issues like the electric vehicle charging stations, we're expecting a report back to Council in the coming months. So obviously we'll be looking at that then. And there are a number of matters that are mentioned in submission, such as the funding of solar panel installations on schools that are being currently directly funded by the state government. So again, we've got an opportunity there to try and do what we can to assist schools to apply for those funding opportunities. One thing that I absolutely have to point out is that we have some incredibly talented and knowledgeable people at Council who work within our sustainability group, and it's been my absolute privilege as the chair of the EnviroPact to deal with those staff. And we've got one officer who was involved in the Adelaide Carbon Neutral Plan. They are incredibly skillful and have an enormous knowledge base, which I think we can take a lot of comfort from, that they know what they're doing, they've got great networks, and that they will be able to take us forward with the appropriate knowledge skilling as necessary, and keeping their knowledge up to date. I think one of the important reasons to refer these matters to the Portfolio Advisory Committee too is that those days of just having a wild guess at what to put in your budget for amounts and projects are over. We just don't have that flexibility in budget anymore. So we need to be really clear that the costings are right. And it was acknowledged by the submitters that they put forward their best estimates, and I'm not being at all critical because it's a very difficult task to get those figures right. But we need to make sure in any interim process that we do get some certainty around the figures, because as we know, in previous times, Council has been burnt by putting an amount in the budget that was a guess, and finding out that the project instead costed many, many times more. And we don't want to do that again in a tight budgetary environment. We can't afford to, and we don't want to run short of funding. The decision to withdraw funding from the VLGA has been something that council has discussed, and that there'd been consensus among councillors that that was the way to go. So I think acknowledging again our funding, our budgetary situation, I'm very pleased to see that we're going to direct that funding towards COVID-19 recovery green action plan items, and I think that that's appropriate at this point in time. So again, while noting that the matters will be referred on to the PAC, Mayor, if you can just let me briefly run through what's funded, proposed to be funded in my portfolio area in the capital and operating budget for 2021.
Councillor Marshall, I'm mindful that we are a bit over time, but I will give you an extension of time, and I'll be consistent with other councillors as well.
That's great. Yeah, mindful about the importance of budget and also the importance of letting people know what we're doing.
Absolutely.
So we're investing in parks, open spaces and streetscapes to improve ecological outcomes, and we're allocating close to $1 million to Rosehill Park wetland, 500,000 to Woodlands Park wetland. We're putting in over 750,000 to tree planting to increase tree canopy cover, 500,000 for ground conservation to improve biodiversity. We've got over $250,000 on neighbourhood planting and vegetation projects, about $140,000 for flood modelling studying. We've got capital works upgrades and new builds which are incorporating environmentally sustainable design, and we've got money for air conditioning and heating unit replacements for some of our facilities. We've got some funding towards monitoring, evaluation and reporting framework to measure climate change adaptation performance by council. Importantly, we've got funding to run a range of programs designed to assist our community. We're offering energy audits and retrofit programs for pensioners. We're organising energy audits for local businesses. We're running the Sustainability Champions program again, which is fabulous. We're running community workshops, forums and newsletters for residents and businesses to support behavioural change through My Smart Garden and green living. We're providing a tailored schools program called Flick the Switch to support schools to identify energy efficiency opportunities and measures for implementation. We're aiding commercial building owners to obtain finance to undertake environmental improvement works to their buildings to make them more energy and water efficient, with the loan repaid through council rates, which council then passes on to the lender. We're encouraging developers to install renewable energy facilities at their premises through planning permit processes. All of our streetscape and parks master plans incorporate future climate change impacts and improvements to ecological outcomes, including water retention in the landscape. We're actioning expert technical advice on passive irrigation. We're keeping up and making sure we've got the resources to keep up our active membership of WAGA, which is a group of 8 councils in the West who work together both in terms of advocacy, but to work on regionally important projects. We've got education initiatives to build the awareness, knowledge and capability of staff, broad range of staff in responding to climate change. And I'll just mention, I can see the Mayor's patience wearing off. So I've got a lot more I could say, but I'll just try and keep it at this. I did want to mention again, we're making sure that we've got the officer resources to assess and implement the outcomes of the Renewable Energy Power Purchase Agreement tender process, which is designed to procure 100% renewable electricity for council's operations. So again, that is such an important, that will play such an important role, both in reducing own emissions, but also in helping our community transition to renewable energy. I do have more that I wish I could say, but I'm very mindful that I have run significantly over time. So I hope people take that rather long list of things that we're doing and things that hopefully we'll continue to do. There's definitely always more to do, but I'm pleased that we are doing so much in this space as it is.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. You probably would have talked all night if I had have let you, but I know how passionate you are on this topic. So, councillors, I am happy for you to speak over time if required. As Councillor Marshall did, particularly on your portfolio, I know that everyone's quite passionate. So, and there's a lot to say on the budget. So, would anyone else like to speak on this item? Oh. Now I've given my spiel, no one wants to use their extra time. Oh no, okay, Councillor Nation.
I will, and just to tie in with hopefully the next item when we hopefully move the fair action plan, just wanted to touch on a few of the things that are in this budget which revolve around that theme of fair. And council sees the theme of fair as being a fair city that values diversity, where everyone feels safe, is included and has access to healthy food, services and housing. When you have a look through this budget, I definitely believe that it's fair, and particularly for vulnerable people in our community. And we know there are a great deal of people in our community going through challenging times at present. A couple of the things that are in the budget that will hopefully help people over the next 12 months. We're continuing our COVID recovery grants. This current financial year we're in now, we're committed $250,000 of funding. Next financial year, being the budget we're moving now, it's about $450,000. And as Councillor Sharp mentioned, that's available for a whole range of people in our community, from businesses, community groups, hopefully individual artists as well. So it's there to help the more vulnerable members of our community, as well as organisations who are playing a vital role in the COVID recovery, to be able to help take Moonee Valley out of this pandemic, whenever that may be. That community grants program as well, and I really want to send kudos to our community grants team, because they have basically completely changed our grants program to react to the pandemic, and we've been able to get funds to community groups so quickly, which I know other councils are struggling with. Some other councils haven't even developed a grant scheme as yet, or are looking to do it. So I think our grants team should definitely be commended. Still on the theme of fair, obviously one of the major initiatives in this year's budget is to finalise the design and construction plan for the Flemington Community Hub, which will cater for a wide range of people in our Flemington community, particularly those on the estate who use it day in, day out. And for many of them, it is like a second home. So getting that project underway is so important. In terms of our service delivery, we've got 1.65 million committed to community development programs and services to enhance the resilience, connection, health and well-being of the community, particularly within areas of high disadvantage. We've got 1.43 million on outreach and support services to facilitate independent living, 1.26 million on youth programs, events and support services that enhance the health and well-being of young people aged 12 to 25, $928,000 on social planning and wellbeing to deliver a number of programs that improve health and wellbeing in the community. So I really am pleased to support this budget. It is a fair budget. I also just wanted to mention that as a council, we're in a really good position because we don't have any debt. And unlike a lot of councils, we've been able to react to the current pandemic quickly and efficiently. And as Councillor Marshall said, develop a budget that could have been deferred, but we were in a position not to do so. So I would really like to extend my gratitude to our council officers who have helped shape this budget. I think it's a fantastic document, and I'm so glad that we are in a position to move it tonight, and we're not worrying about trying to still come up with a budget and move it later in the year like many other councils.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No? Councillor Gauch-Marici.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I will be conscious of trying not to replicate what others have already commented on to limit how far over time I potentially go. But I would, of course, like to start by saying that I am particularly excited to see funding restored to the libraries. That was something that was really important to us, and it was really highlighted when we popped out the draft budget for feedback that we knew how important our libraries were going to be, particularly in supporting our community as the pandemic continues. So I'm really pleased to see that funding restored. And obviously, as the others have mentioned, that it is a tighter budget because of the period that we're in. and particularly that we're really pleased to be able to put forward there's $5 million worth of support to our community, whether that's in grants or hardship relief or all of the aspects that we are supporting our community through, whether those are businesses or residents or other ratepayers. So really pleased by that. But the bit I particularly wanted to touch on, I'm conscious that Councillor Lawrence is not here. So I really wanted to be able to touch on the economic development space. Obviously, our traders have, many of our traders have done it particularly tough over the last few months. So in terms of the items in our budget, in addition to this pandemic pieces of work, the other pieces of work in our budget in the economic development space to support our local businesses and traders include a diverse series of training workshops and programs that build capacity and social know-how of our business community, providing support to trader associations to enhance the value, vibrancy and diversity of business precincts, providing networking opportunities, supporting connections and knowledge sharing to
Councillor
stimulate
Gatchimarici,
local supply chain.
I feel
And
like
that's
your
a
internet
project in
might be
development at the
dropping out.
moment. Yes.
Unless I think I'm getting nods from other councillors.
Cool.
So it's not just me that's thinking it is. Did you want to have another try again, Councillor Gatchimarici, just that last sentence? We'll see how it's working.
Cool. A very important one to me, creating more attractive business centres, lighting trees in Strathmore and Essendon North. Is that a bit better? Activating public spaces through strategic buy local campaigns linked to Moonee Valley business and the COVID recovery. The co-working and enterprise spaces, I think I touched on before my internet dropped a little. Encouraging and promoting tourism, I say visiting friends and family, but do it in a responsible, socially distanced manner. To our business areas post-COVID, such as our 20-minute neighbourhoods, which we are so truly proud to be promoting. Supporting and encouraging new programs to foster connections and support local jobs, remove barriers to employment, streamlining internal processes for new small business permit approvals, and simplifying startups to enhance economic development opportunities. The other interesting one we often get asked about, there's one around auditing and measuring vacancy rates in Moonee Valley business areas. So that's one that's in development. And communicating legislation, regulations and council decisions that impact on our Moonee Valley business community.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Gatchimarici. I think I saw a hand up there from Councillor Sorais.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of things that I've noted in the budget and very pleased to see as being one of the councillors in the Rosehill ward that we're looking at 29.2 million to progress the East Keilor Leisure Centre redevelopment. And I happened to be there the other day with Deputy Mayor, Councillor Sypek, and we went and had a look through, and it's bigger than Ben Hur. When you actually physically are there and see what it's like, this is going to be an amazing, well overdue and deserved project for the municipality of Moonee Valley and for all to be able to share. I noticed there's 2 million for the construction works at the Overland Reserve Multi-Use Pavilion, and that has certainly had a huge amount of patch-ups over the years, and so this is finally seeing something being built and something that will last for more longevity than what they've done in the past. And also I note that there's 2 million to renew local road network across the municipality. So as council's transport and traffic portfolio, all of that is fantastic amount of money that's being put into the budget to fix most of our roads that certainly are well worn and well used. So I'm just wanting to make those little comments and observations. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Any other councillor? Councillor Sypek. You just need to unmute yourself, Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, firstly, I'd like to give my thanks to the officers and the CEO for producing this budget. It's not a document that's taken very, very lightly, and especially with everything that's happened this year and the beginning and later of last year, where we had the fires, whether we had the floods, and now we've had the COVID-19. Even though the floods and the fires didn't affect us that much, but we tried and we did whatever we can to support our colleague councillors in the affected areas. The budget is not just about spending money, but it covers a variety of things, and we've got fees and charges here and rates, and we've also tried to help out businesses in regards to their permits, like footpath trading. We helped them out there, and we tried to help out all different types of businesses throughout. And as Councillor Nation mentioned, we had grants to now support budget as well. So this budget was a bit unorthodox, is probably the word that would be best used for it. But as Councillor Marshall put, we do have a lot of green initiatives, and I think one of the great initiatives that we started a year back was putting solar panels on a lot of our council buildings. And I know you can't see it from the street, but the clock tower is one of our bigger buildings, and that's got full solar panels on it right now. So that's regenerating a lot of electricity for the council. I'm hoping to see panels virtually on every council building, and hopefully our little beehives will be right next to our solar panels through our bee program. Once again, I'd just like to congratulate our officers for doing a great job on the budget, and I look forward to, well, if we all get re-elected, I look forward to reviewing this budget so we can actually do minor adjustments or major adjustments to it that will probably cater and suit a lot more organisations and communities and residents that require council assistance. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Now, I didn't hear any opposition to that motion being the Councillor Sharp's motion, so I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.2 on the agenda is MV 2040 Action Plan Fair. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council resolves to A, adopt the MV 2040 Action Plan Fair in attachment A, noting its focus on delivering COVID-19 pandemic recovery initiatives in the plan's first 12 months, including the following changes. 1, include an additional item in the plan under MV 2040 Action 1.3.1, which states, be a community leader in speaking out against incidences of racism, discrimination, harassment and vilification experienced by our community, and continue to champion councils standing together and supporting diversity statement along with other initiatives. 2, revise wording of item 84 of the plan under MV 2040 Action 4.3.1 to say, deliver a grants program using a community development model to support community-led initiatives, including a focus on pandemic recovery until June 2021. This grant scheme will be available to local community groups, organisations and businesses, with a dedicated stream to local artists being no less than $50,000 of the total grant pool, with artists able to apply for funds to assist their creative pursuits without the requirement of having an ABN, being a sole trader, or needing to be auspiced by an organisation. B, note the MV 2040 Action Plan Fair will be reviewed 12 months from the date of adoption, with an annual report presented to Council in 2021 that will note the progress of actions to date, identify potential reprioritisation of initiatives for the coming 12 months based on available resources, ensure the plans are aligned with service planning and annual budget cycles, reflect any significant changes and shifts in service provision models. C, rescind the early years plan, the disability action plan, the diversity, access and equity policy, the active ageing strategy, Thrive youth strategy, the LGBTIQ action plan, and the community safety plan as detailed in attachment B, following the adoption of MV 2040 Action Plan Fair. D, Note the MV 2040 Action Plan Fair Background Review 2020, Attachment C. The MV 2040 Action Plan Fair Engagement Summary 2020, Attachment D, that informed the development of the MV 2040 Action Plan Fair. And E, allow council officers to make minor editing and typographical changes to the MV 2040 Action Plan Fair, Attachment A, as required.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Nation, I was just going to say, do you want to take a second to have a drink? It wasn't as long as Councillor Gauchemarich's a few weeks ago, but you may still need a breather.
No, that's all right. Councillor Gauchemarichi, I think, was 13 minutes. She definitely holds the record.
Thank you, Councillor Nation.
So thank you, Mayor. I'm extremely proud to move Moonee Valley City Council's Fair Action Plan, that following its potential endorsement tonight will become one of our 7 guiding action plans that sit under Moonee Valley 2040. These documents will help guide our city for the next 20 years, and this Fair Action Plan will sit alongside our Green Action Plan, Connected Action Plan, Thriving Action Plan, Beautiful Action Plan, our Reconciliation Action Plan, and our Community Facilities Action Plan. Bringing together everything this city does and stands for in 7 key documents is a remarkable achievement for this city. When I first started on council back in 2012, there were close to 100 different strategies, action plans, and policies. And despite all that text that sat in all these council documents, it actually meant less was done. There were so many plans that there was little accountability. And that is actually what is so good about these action plans. They aren't just about what we say as a council, they are filled with actions that we must do as a council. This particular action plan, our Fair Action Plan, focuses on reducing inequality through neighbourhood place-based approaches by working with target populations who face barriers to inclusion. It will bring together a range of separate action plans, policies and strategies, including Council's Early Years Plan, Disability Action Plan, Diversity, Access and Equity Policy, LGBTIQ Action Plan, our Active Ageing Strategy, our Youth Strategy, and our Community Safety Plan. In essence, FAIR is about reducing inequality to ensure council can deliver better health and wellbeing outcomes for the entire Moonee Valley community. To put this theme at the forefront of what we do as a council and make it one of the very first action plans that we will formally move shows just how far we have come as a progressive, fair, diverse and inclusive organisation. When I moved the draft of this document, I referenced how I went back and had a look at the council plan 2009 to 2013, which was the guiding document for our council when I was first elected in 2012. The key pillars and themes in this plan were a dynamic organisation, a well-planned city, a city for investment and growth, a city that provides smart transport, a healthy environment, and a creative city. All commendable themes, but nothing about celebrating diversity, creating an inclusive city, ensuring equity across Moonee Valley, and making this a truly accessible city. The FAIR theme in MV 2040 and this action plan is all of that. It is an acknowledgement of the importance of respecting, appreciating, and including every single member of this community, regardless of gender, cultural background, religion, sexual orientation, or economic status. Now, these are themes which are so prominent right now as we battle an unprecedented pandemic that has challenged many of our residents physically, mentally, and financially, while at the same time starting to finally acknowledge the systemic racism that exists in our society, in particular, the continued interpersonal and institutional racism experienced by our Indigenous population. It is something that I wanted to highlight in particular by strengthening this document even further with my recommendation to add the following key action: to be a community leader in speaking out against incidences of racism, discrimination, harassment, and vilification experienced by our community, and continue to champion council standing together and supporting diversity statement along with other initiatives. We have a responsibility as a council and as councillors to not just sit on the sidelines, but to continue to advocate for what is right. We have been gifted such an important platform that we need to use that platform to ensure those without one are still spoken up for and not left behind. Not being left behind is also the motivation for the other amendment to this motion, which is to include a dedicated grant stream for local artists in our COVID recovery grants for 2021. Council is committing close to $750,000 in COVID grants to help local community groups and businesses to survive and then recover at this challenging time. One particular industry that has been devoid of support during this pandemic is our local artists and creators, many of whom are not eligible for JobKeeper and have been left out of the state government's recovery funding by Creative Victoria due to the requirement to be publicly practicing for more than 5 years to receive any funding. This stream is primarily aimed at locals who create to ensure they have enough funding for supplies to keep them creating. We always talk about our city's vibrant arts scene, so let's make sure there is still a scene when we eventually emerge on the other side. The total pool of 50,000 is less than a tenth of the total COVID grant pool, and I seek your support, councillors, to include this stream, as for such a small financial investment, we will get such a much greater dividend for our city. Councillors, I commend this motion and our Fair Action Plan and ask that you please join me to help make Moonee Valley a fair city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall.
Well said, Councillor Nation, and it's an absolute delight to be able to speak in favour of the motion. And if I reflect on the things that are important to me, and one of the reasons, or probably the primary reason why I had any interest in becoming involved in politics, at the core of that is that issue of fairness and social justice. And to me, it'll be one of the great legacies of this council that through MV 2040 and the Fair Action Plan tonight, that we have a very clear pathway to a fairer, more just Moonee Valley. We know how harmful inequality is, and it's harmful not just to the individuals who are suffering inequality, but it's harmful to our broader society. And what we're doing through this plan is to focus on target populations, so people that we know are experiencing inequality, whatever the measure, and approaching this on a neighbourhood basis consistent with the rest of the planning that we're doing. And we're really providing, as Councillor Nation indicated, not just a whole lot of words in fancy documents, but a very practical, clear pathway to try and improve the lives of so many of our community. The 5 strategic directions are set out, and you can see they cover pretty much anything you could think of. So we've got those directions, and then we've got the objectives and the actions that will actually help council to achieve the objectives. As you go through, I think there's 97 items in there. We've got to focus on cultural diversity, on the essential issue of mental health, which we know is an issue for so many people in Moonee Valley. Importantly too, there's a big focus on providing people with the opportunities to participate in council decision-making processes and looking at the ways that we improve this. And to me, this is absolutely fundamental, because that ability to have your say in democratic processes is really one of the most effective tools to try and advocate, to try and change your position. And we've seen at times, certainly, that we've had people who perhaps know how to use the system, might be educated, affluent, and with enormous resources to draw on. And they've drowned out the voices of people who haven't had those resources. So we need to make sure that those sorts of examples never, ever happen again. We've got to make sure that people feel safe and that they feel comfortable in having their say. And we can do that in a range of ways. And the plan sets out we'll foster leadership and we'll foster people's advocacy skills. So to me, that's absolutely one of the fundamentals to this plan, making sure that people whose voices we don't hear, or people whose voices are drowned out, have the opportunity to really participate in council. The plan also contains a range of actions to address housing inequality and the delivery of safe and secure housing. And it does so at the time while also acknowledging that there is a special place for protecting heritage. And that's, again, about that issue of fairness. We know from our data that housing in Moonee Valley is incredibly unaffordable, and providing housing security is actually fundamental to that issue of fairness. I am in heated agreement with Councillor Nation's additional points, and I think that issue around artists, unfortunately, they seem to have fallen through so many gaps, and many people, myself included, know people who are suffering significantly because of that lack of income. So I think it's a great idea. The additional point, probably the plan has so many things around cultural diversity, but we need to call racism out, and we need to do it by naming it, not talk around it. So I absolutely agree with the addition, that explicit point around not just standing by, not being patronising or paternalistic about it, but again, it's about empowering people to try and make a difference and supporting them where we can. And just in finishing, Mayor, you won't have to cut me off this time, so I'll make sure I behave. I really want to thank our officers who have developed this action plan. And, you know, it's people who are both the ones who have written the policy and gone through all of those enormous processes to get here, but also day in, day out, our frontline staff who work so hard in Moonee Valley to improve the lives of the people they encounter, and who see every day what the impacts of inequality are. And we're just so fortunate to have so many fantastic individuals who work at council. They work here because they care and because they want to make a difference. And again, because to them, that issue of fairness is absolutely central to who they are as human beings. So I'm incredibly pleased, and we should be proud to be adopting this plan tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Would any other councillor like to speak on this action plan? Councillor Sorais.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't actually have a copy of the motion that Councillor Nation put up because I've got the old papers. But I just wanted to touch on, I think you'd mentioned something about putting funding in towards arts in our community and having grants for the arts area. Am I correct in saying that?
Councillor Nation's words were, if you just give me one moment, deliver a grants program using a community development model to support community-led initiatives, including a focus on pandemic recovery until June 2021. This grant scheme will be available to local community groups, organisations and businesses with a dedicated stream to local artists, being no less than $50,000 of the total grant pool, with artists able to apply for funds to assist their creative pursuits without the requirement of having an ABN, being a sole trader, or needing to be auspiced by an organisation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Nation. Can I just throw in here that probably about 20 odd years ago, I was at a conference in Adelaide at the Arts Festival there. Might have been even more than that, maybe 30 years ago, where people in the arts realm, whether that be music, creative, dance, theatre, whatever, this is their occupation. And it's never been recognised as a career or as something that is seen as vitally some form of profession or income. So I think that by putting that into the FAIR plan is a fantastic initiative to do that, and I commend you for that, and I think it's wonderful because these people need to be recognised that this is their work and they have just as much entitlement to get support through whatever means that might be as any other person that may have a professional, as it's commonly seen, or an administrative role or a technical role or apprentice role, whatever that may be in the workforce. So thank you for bringing that into this motion, and I just wanted to raise that as something that it's been a long time coming. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Before we go any further, I ask for anyone else. Did anyone else need the words of Councillor Nation's motion, or is everyone clear with what it was? I'm not getting any shakes of the head, so I'm assuming everyone understands what we will be voting on, but I will ask if anyone would like to speak on the item first. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Gaucho-Marici.
I promise to literally be very, very brief because 99% of what I had written down to cover has been covered. But I really just wanted to reinforce the commentary around the team that has brought this together. It's been obviously 2 years in the making since we approved the 2040 strategy, and in that 2 years, the amount of work that's been undertaken by those teams and by consultation, and whether that's research or writing, for me, I think this is an incredible body of work that they should be commended for, and it reflects the wants and desires of our community, not just the municipality as well. So certainly a huge kudos to the staff that have brought this together. For me, I think back to 2 years ago when 2040 was endorsed, and to stand there 2 years later and look at the action plans being developed and the meaningful changes that they actually resulting for our community is so exciting to me. I think about us being able to have clearly achievable outcomes and meaningful outcomes. And that for me is such an important part of why I ran for council in the first place, and what we've covered in the last 4 years is just the changes that we're able to make through such meaningful strategies and such meaningful action plans. So really a huge, huge, huge thank you to the officers that have pulled this together. It's an incredible piece of work, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gauchimarici. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just quickly, I'll be brief because I won't go repeat what any other councillor has said. I certainly concur with all that everybody has said tonight, and I would just like to say thank you to Councillor Nation for putting this up. It's extremely important. It's certainly at this time as well. So well done, and thank you to the officers. That's all, pretty much all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor? Nope. I don't believe there was any dissent, so I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Item 10.3 on the agenda is the amendment to Activities and General Amenities Local Law 2018 to 2028 adoption. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillors, do I have a motion for this? Been talking all night. Is everyone out of breath and doesn't want to move the motion? Or move any motion? Councillor Gauchimarici.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Gauchimarici. And do I have a seconder for Councillor Gauchimarici? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Gauchimarici.
I will speak just very, very briefly. Obviously, we discussed this at length a few months ago, in what seems like a lifetime ago, actually, in March, because I think it was the last council meeting we were all sitting in front of each other. So it literally seems like a lifetime ago. But when we discussed this in March, we discussed it quite heavily, and it's about enabling our local police to be able to do their jobs by modifying our laws to reflect powers for them better, in a very layman principle. And I think it's fairly self-explanatory as a report of what we've already covered. It's gone out for review and now it's being implemented. But I look forward to us making mention of someone's hooning somehow during this conversation.
Or not even, but we'll see. Councillor Marshall.
No, I have no hooning history to disclose. So I'm happy to speak in support of the motion. As Councillor Gauchimarici indicated, this was something that we were required to undertake a consultation process as an amendment to our local laws. Essentially, it will give police additional powers, give us additional powers under our local laws to try and stop hoon behaviour, which often pops up in the news and can be obviously incredibly dangerous and cause significant injury both to drivers and spectators. So we had the consultation process as required, received no submissions or requests to present submissions. So on that basis, I think this is an entirely sensible local law amendment, and obviously something that was very significantly supported by Victoria Police.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor? Nope. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.4 is Council Plan 2017 to 21 Quarter 3 Progress Report for 2019 to 20. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Gatchmarici.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Gatchmarici. And a seconder? Councillor Nation. Councillor Gatchmarici, would you like to speak on the item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a brief overview for those who haven't read the actual report that's attached to the home. The 83% of the quarter's progress is on track. I think what is really important for us to be mindful of, though, is that this was the quarter to 30 March. So obviously the impacts of COVID will be seen much more obviously over the final quarter to come. I think it will be interesting and probably not as positive as we would like it to be in terms of what happens over that final quarter and how many things went off track because of COVID. So that's something that we can preempt and be mindful of when it comes to us. But despite that, I think there's a number of fantastic achievements that should be mentioned. The at-call hard waste collection was something that was really strongly advocated for in previous years and has been implemented, and that's showing really good successes. So that's a huge achievement. The Heart Award nomination for our early years and libraries is a fantastic achievement. And the Neighbourhood Series pilot project, which has had 28 activations across all 13 neighbourhoods and engaged 1,000 of our community, 1,000 members of our community. So there's been some really fantastic achievements, I think, over the last 3 months that are well worth talking about as well. But 83% are on track or completed, and 17% are off track or due to be completed or no longer required. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Gatchmarici. Councillor Nation.
Only very briefly, I don't know if Councillor Gatchmarici mentioned our Heart Award nomination as one of the achievements. I was just looking through my notes then. So one of our key achievements was the development of Council's reconciliation plan continuing. As I said in the earlier Fair Action Plan discussion, our reconciliation plan does form one of our key 7 action plans under MV 2040. So that reconciliation plan is hopefully going to come out in a draft form in the coming few months. The plan has been acknowledged by Reconciliation Victoria with a Heart Award nomination for developing an acknowledgement of country for early years and libraries. So that's in the report. Sorry, Councillor Gatchmarici, if you did say that, and I'm just repeating you, but I was just reading my notes when you were speaking, so I do apologise. If we've both mentioned it, then excellent, it deserves to be mentioned twice. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No hands? No. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Rightio, councillors, we are up to item 11 on the agenda, which is notices of motion, and we have 2 notices of motion tonight. So 11.1 notices of motion number 2020/10 supervised injection room facility in MBCC. I call on Councillor Sorais to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Take notice at the council meeting to be held 23rd of June 2020. It is my intention to move that 1, council writes to the Victorian State Government to advise that Moonee Valley City Council does not support any future proposal to locate a supervised injecting room facility in the municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it for debate.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Sorais.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In speaking on my motion, I'd like to refer to the following information in support. So firstly, I became aware of the issue after reading the review panel summary on medically supervised injection room trial, the MSIR, which is a document that is available through PHS to go through, which prompted me basically to get on the front foot before this may be put forward by the state government to Moonee Valley City Council. Funnily enough, watching television this afternoon on Channel 7, I note that the Melbourne City Council Deputy Mayor Aaron Wood has also put up some motion this evening for their council meeting, and on Channel 7 they had advised that tonight that would be taking place, and basically his comments were that he felt that there needed to be a task force set up and to scrap the Queen Victoria Market site. It wasn't a dumping ground for this type of facility. And just a little couple of excerpts from his motion that he's putting forward tonight. He's basically requesting that the CEO write to the Minister to reject the proposed medically supervised or MSIR site on Victoria Street adjacent to Queen Vic Market, ask why a second preferred location was chosen when the independent report is silent on a preferred location, request that a task force to consider all options to address the issue, and request management to provide advice to council on any planning controls or other powers that would enable council to refuse the proposed location. And in part of the background, there is a couple of items, but I think something worth mentioning is that he says that the area is earmarked as an innovation jobs precinct, future home to 20,000 new residents, the revitalised Queen Vic Market, and are predicted to generate hundreds of millions of gross local products. And the precinct will be home to affordable housing, family services and childcare upon completion of the Munro development. The precinct is already home to vulnerable residents immediately adjacent to the preferred site. It says a harm minimisation approach to drug addiction is supported. However, the decision to immediately progress with a second MSIR without an overarching strategy to tackle the root cause of drug addiction, as opposed to the symptoms, is not supported. It also says there is compelling evidence that shows where there is inadequate drug and alcohol rehabilitation beds available, drug-dependent individuals who wish to recover often struggle to secure a bed. So it goes on about Melbourne City Council's view through the Deputy Mayor there. And just a couple of things that I would like to add to my reasoning for putting up this motion. And that is that 2 years ago, trial of the medically supervised facility started in June last year. This is from an article in The Age published 11 months ago. It says, a 2-year trial of the medically supervised facility started in June last year, and advocates say it is saving lives and getting people into treatment and recovery. However, a public housing tenants meeting last week heard how the injecting room had made life intolerable, with used needles littering the estate like confetti and human faeces covering the stairs of the Housing Commission flats. That meeting was just the latest outburst in a rising chorus of community anger over the centre, with increasing calls for it to be moved elsewhere or closed altogether. Scores of Age readers have had their say on what life is like on the streets of Richmond now and what should be done about the injecting room. And here's what they had to say. I will just read maybe 4 excerpts from the community people. David says, listen to the residents. These stories are real. They should not be made to suffer as a result of a well-intentioned state government program. Be brave enough to admit this initiative is not working. Georgie says, I am a Richmond mother. In the past week, I've had to flee the path with my 3-year-old because 3 drug dealers were working. I've been abused on Bridge Road by an ice addict who followed me until I ran into a restaurant with my kids. I was a huge supporter of the injecting room, but not anymore in this location. I no longer feel safe and I'm angry. Simon says, I live on Lennox Street, right next to the injecting room, and have a child at the school. Having the centre next to a school is quite deplorable. Every day, children see people injecting, defecating, swearing, fighting, hitting cars, damaging properties. Users inject and then get in cars and drive past the school. 2 cars have been driven onto the curb with users slumped over the wheel, unconscious. Does it need one of these cars to hit a child for someone to listen and take appropriate action? And the list goes on. And I don't want to continue with it because this is coming from people in those areas. For me, my motion is not to raise alarm or hysteria with the community, but clearly to be prepared for what the future of an MSIR may or may not transpire. And if that may was to include a future proposal with Moonee Valley City Council, that I would implore my fellow councillors to support a motion until we have solid evidence otherwise that these MSIR are successful. And I do have empathy for people who go to use these centres. However, I feel that there needs to be a whole lot of answers to questions that need to be resolved before we entertain such a facility. And I would seek support from my fellow councillors to get on board and follow this through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've seconded this motion for debate on the basis that as elected representatives, we should not shirk our responsibilities to debate, discuss and vote on matters just because they may make us uncomfortable. This is not a matter that I thought would be or should be debated in this term of council, but Councillor Sorais has put it on the meeting papers and therefore we cannot shy away from discussing this matter tonight. Firstly, I will state that I believe in providing support to vulnerable and at-risk members of our community. I'm also a strong believer that addiction is a disease that needs to be treated rather than viewing addiction as a criminal problem. I actually see merit in the argument supporting the decriminalisation of drug use, and I stress that decriminalisation and legalisation are 2 completely different things. Decriminalisation means taking an act that is illegal and removing criminal penalties. For example, you don't get a criminal record for speeding, although you have to pay the fine. Legalisation means taking an act that is illegal and making it legal with no fines, penalties, etc. Far too long, state governments have waged a war on drugs, most of the time with blatant disregard for the user. And yes, users may be making a choice, but there is so much research into the benefits of investing in harm minimisation, treatment and rehabilitation to achieve much better outcomes than leaving a user in prison with a criminal record. Many of us may have a direct or indirect connection to family, friends, maybe colleagues who have suffered from addiction. And the closer those experiences come, the more that option of treatment and rehabilitation makes sense. So that brings us to the motion before us, supervised injecting rooms. In principle, I believe these can be of benefit. There is some evidence to suggest that safe injecting facilities may reduce drug-related crime in areas where they operate, and a reduction in drug-related paraphernalia, such as needles, being discarded in public places. In addition to community advantages, there is a body of evidence that says those who inject in public places are at higher risk of rushing their injection and potentially overdosing, and as such, a medically supervised injecting centre removes that element of rushing to use the drug and therefore harm. One of the major benefits of supervised injecting rooms is that if someone overdoses, trained medical professionals are there to save their life, whereas a user may die if injecting in a public place. They also offer access to clean equipment, which drastically reduces the chances of contracting infectious diseases or overdosing. In addition, users have access to trained medical staff, and there are considerable benefits of having regular interactions with health professionals, allowing relationship development and greater health monitoring. This helps to engage users in society and their own health, which can assist them seeking further treatment. It is argued punitive measures rarely work and often lead to more deaths in users, more crime in the community, and a more scared local population. Helping people through engagement has a huge body of evidence and helps respond to the issue of addiction compassionately by making the streets safer for users and the community. So then that brings us to Moonee Valley. Would I support a supervised injecting facility in Moonee Valley if we had a significant problem in our community? Yes, I probably would, on the proviso that any potential facility should be located in a spot that ensures residents' rights, amenity, lifestyles and safety is protected at all costs. But there isn't, and I've not seen Moonee Valley referenced in any document or study suggesting there is a problem. So yes, I support supervised injecting facilities where they are warranted or where there is need. Do I think that is in Moonee Valley? No. And let me be clear, that is not a NIMBY view and not in my backyard view, but because there is no evidence that there is a need for this sort of facility in Moonee Valley. So would I support a safe injecting room in Moonee Valley right now? Probably no, because any decision would be grossly misinformed. Does that mean I would never support one in Moonee Valley? Well, no as well. So where that puts me on voting on this matter, I'm probably as confused about that as I am to why this motion was on the meeting papers, but it is, and so we are here. And that's me, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No? In that, Councillor Marshall.
So I'll be speaking against the motion. And before I get into some of the issues I wanted to raise, I just wanted to draw attention to something Councillor Saray said. I'm not sure whether perhaps the Deputy Mayor has interpreted something incorrectly, but somewhere what was said is incorrect, because I'm looking at the review panel's key recommendations as an summary excerpt, which is actually a shorter read than the full document.
Sorry, Councillor Marshall, are you referring, I'm just seeing Councillor Sypek sort of questioning, are you referring to the Deputy Mayor of the City of Melbourne?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Sypek. Yes, wasn't referring to you. Apologies for not making that clear. So the summary says the panel were concerned that a single location cannot effectively address all needs for such a service in a city the size of Melbourne. And that's one of the concerns. The report talks about those amenity issues, and basically it's because the facility has been overwhelmed because there's been such a high demand. So it says, therefore, the panel recommended that the government expand the current trial to another supervised injecting service in an appropriate location. Talked about the benefits of that. To be most effective, the panel recommended that a new service should be located where the greatest drug harms are outside North Richmond, in the vicinity of a major illicit drug market, where there are high rates of overdoses and public injecting. The review panel identified the City of Melbourne as the location that best meets these criteria. So the panel were in no doubt that a second facility is needed, and they specifically identified the City of Melbourne as being the appropriate location. So I'm not sure whether there's been some misunderstanding somewhere. And again, Councillor Suresh, you may have just been referring to what you'd heard that the Deputy Mayor of the City of Melbourne had said, but that's not correct, because the panel report is absolutely explicit in relation to that point. My concern, and thank you, Councillor Nation, too, for having that in-depth discussion about the complexities, the issues around the medically supervised injecting rooms and why they may be of significant benefit. For me, seeing this notice of motion come up, I suppose my concern is that whether it's intended or not, that it ends up being a scare campaign. And I think my concern is that scare campaigns in the long run actually undermine the confidence that that our community has in politicians, and that's just the reality. We've seen it on all sides of politics, those scare campaigns that happen, and they often happen in election years. So why would we unnecessarily concern our community in this type of way when there's no suggestion at all that Moonee Valley is touted as being a site for a medically supervised injecting room? And when you actually look at the data, so again, the panel report sets out information released from the Coroner's Court. And between the period from January 2015 to September 2019, In Yarra, there are a total of 93 heroin-related deaths, with 51 of those occurring in non-residential areas. And as, again, Councillor Nation touched on, that's the issue that's particularly important if you're looking at the siting of where you would put a facility. In the City of Melbourne, there were 51 heroin-related deaths, with 25 of those occurring in non-residential areas. Now, I had to go a very long way down that list to find Moonee Valley, because over that almost 4-year period, actually over 4-year period, Moonee Valley had 18 deaths in total, and 2 of those deaths occurred in a non-residential setting. So all the measures, all of the things that drive the need for the location for a supervised injecting facility, we sit right down the list. So if the government was decide to start looking at a third facility sometime in the future, and that's not something that's contemplated at this stage, Moonee Valley would be a very, very long way down the list of the likely areas to be considered, below Stonington, below Maroondah, below many other local government areas. I certainly too, again, as Councillor Nation's touched on, I don't want to participate in anything at all that would seek to demonise people who, I also share the view, are suffering a serious medical condition. And again, whether it's intended or not, that is the way that these sorts of discussions usually go, and particularly when they get out in the media, and that is just the reality. And that's not something for me that I want to be part of at all. But most fundamentally for me, supporting a motion like this is inconsistent with the obligations that we have as a councillor not to predetermine matters. We're entitled to have our personal views on matters, and we all bring personal views to our role as councillors. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. But we have to keep an open mind in all of our decision making. We have to weigh up the evidence and information. We have to take all of that in. We have to balance it up with our views. We have to put all of that in our head and think, okay, well, what is the right decision? And that's absolutely at the crux of our obligations as decision makers. And as the saying goes, if we can't bring an open mind, but not an empty head to our decision making, then we really need to question whether we should be here. So I won't be supporting the motion, and have obviously set out the reasons why.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor on this item? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good, thank you. Look, I would like to say that I applaud Councillor Surace for your intent. I honestly do. I guess for me, I don't feel like I have the information nor the knowledge around this subject. I acknowledge other councillors have data that they have spoken to. I don't have that data. I don't have that information. To write to the state government about something that I feel like I just feel like we are potentially being put in a position where we're having to vote on something that we're all not across. And I am concerned about that, I guess, because you can't make decisions unless you understand, or at least have knowledge about an issue, for me. So, like I said, while I do acknowledge your intentions, Councillor Surace, and applaud them, if there was a way that I could, I'd prefer to abstain, but obviously the Local Government Act doesn't allow us to abstain, and I'd be abstaining because I don't have the information. But obviously we don't have that ability. So, but I can't support writing to the Minister of the State Government on an issue that I don't have that information on. So I'm sorry, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sypek, you'll have to turn your microphone on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've heard the arguments for and I've heard the arguments against. Councillor Nation makes very, very valid points, and he takes snapshot views of you know, what the decision would be today, what could be tomorrow, what could be in the future. Councillor Surace has brought this up, which is also a valid point as well too. And I've got to sort of sit back and think, what would be the first questions the community would ask out of this? Is where is the injecting room going to go? That's going to be the first question that everyone's going to ask. And right now, that's not even an issue right now. So it brings me to the point of a few years back when this council had a notice of motion about becoming a nuclear-free city. And we are a nuclear-free city, Madam Mayor. But I think we've got about as much chance of having an injecting room in Moonee Valley as we have of having a nuclear silo in Moonee Valley. And that would be the only place that we could have it. A few years back, back in late 2016, we had a briefing, and we had a potential ICE facility to be installed in one of our private hospitals in West Essendon. That never happened because the community got behind it, and it just never eventuated out of it. So, Madam Mayor, like I said, I've heard the arguments for and I've heard the arguments against. We don't have all the information. There is no suggestion that there is going to be a facility in here. I think for us to write to the Minister or write to the Premier right now would be the wrong decision right now. If there was any suggestion, it would be a completely different discussion that we're having here. So for me to make an informed decision, like Councillor Sharp said, we don't have all the information, so I will not be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor? Leaves Councillor Gash-Marici.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. This is certainly a really difficult one for me. I certainly see both sides of the conversation, and I certainly understand where the sense of the motion has come from in terms of what may have happened in Melbourne in terms of consultation and what may be perceived as being handed a facility. I certainly see why Councillor Sorais would want this motion to be raised if there was any potential that might happen to us. Certainly, similarly to many other councillors who have mentioned, I certainly support supervised injecting facilities where they're required. Do I think that Moonee Valley requires one? No. Do I think that we will have one? I can't see that happening in the short term based on statistics. Do I look at our community expectations though, and do I think that there are a number of members of our community who have heard enough about the City of Melbourne one or from the motion that was proposed tonight to have a level of concern that we may end up with a facility possibly? I certainly hold the view that we're probably drawing, what's the saying, smoke to the fire or something. We're drawing more attention here than we need to. I don't think that Moonee Valley was ever going to be considered for a facility, so I think this motion is somewhat unnecessary in that sense. But do I think that at the end of the day I'll probably support us not locating a facility in Moonee Valley at this stage? Yes, so I'll probably support the motion right now at this stage, but it's such a tricky one because I think if you came back to me in a couple of years and said, here's some statistics that talk about where we're putting a facility, why we're putting it there, I can't say that my view would be the same. So it's a really difficult one. I think similar to Councillor Sharp, if we had the option to abstain, I'd probably abstain, but we don't. So I'm going to base it on the plethora of circumstances surrounding a discussion right now in front of me.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gash-Marici. Councillor Sorais, there has been opposition, so I will allow you to close.
Thank you. Firstly, I've taken on board the councillors' comments. I just want to make it very clear that this was not set up as a scare campaign. That's not the way I roll in council. It was more about being proactive rather than possibly reactive. It's been a bit of a recent topic that's come up through the media, and given the fact that whilst the recommendations from the DHS report about an MSIR trial and the recommendations based thereon that Councillor Marshall touched on a couple, I'd just like to read item 5 that also says the Victorian Government works with local government and the community to continue to develop local safety and amenity, including formalising the role of the existing roundtable to be responsible for community engagement, community safety and coordination of relevant services. This should include representatives from at least the Department of Health and Human Services, Vic Police, the Yarra Council, local service providers, including the MSIR and the local community. Clearly, that doesn't appear to be the situation with the government saying to Melbourne City Council, we're going to put in an MSIR at opposite the Vic Market without obviously community consultation or council consultation with them. It also goes on to say that there be more emphasis on place management, including in the vicinity of the MSIR, with a clear understanding among staff, service users and community members that disturbing and antisocial behaviour will not be tolerated. Visible community policing is required in areas of active drug trafficking to increase the experience and perception of community safety. As I said earlier, I have empathy for people in these situations, and I know people and who have family members who are drug addicts and who have lost children and members of family to drug addiction. All I'm saying at this point of time is that I feel that there needs to be a lot more reporting and research done about the impact of such facilities to the broader community, where they are placed, the support network that is required for MSIR. And so for that reason, I have put this motion up because I believe that there is a lot more work to be done before the possibility or probability of a safe injecting room is put before this council. As I said earlier.
Sorry, just as a point of clarification, because I'm not clear, because the motion doesn't say what you've just said, Councillor Saray. So is the intention, your motion is to say that there's no MSIR in Moonee Valley, or is your intention to say that if there was to be, that we should be consulted first? I'm not clear. What you just said then is different to what the motion says.
With regards to requesting that they do not have this MSIR in the location that was advised by the government. So for me, I suppose we're kind of in the blind here.
Councillor Marshall, so are you raising it as a point of order, Councillor Marshall?
Sorry, I just think your point of clarification wasn't your response to the point of clarification wasn't relaying what the point was.
To clarify your question, yes, yeah. I am moving what I put in the motion.
But nothing, yeah.
Okay, so we've clarified, instead of going down the point of order line, we clarified the point of clarification. And Councillor Sarais, if you can ensure that you speak on what your motion is. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to add the words after municipality at this point in time. If that
Councillor Sarais, you've moved the motion, and as the mover, you can't amend your motion. So it is as it is. I'm mindful that the time is up, but I'll allow you 20 seconds if you require.
That's all right. I just feel that whilst I'm sympathetic to people that are vulnerable in our municipality, perhaps this is something that is perhaps premature, and I'm just wanting to just get that on the books, basically, to say that this is something that all the comments that have come from the councils are warranted. I understand all that, but I just feel that, as Councillor Nation said earlier, if we were to put this out, I think it was Councillor Nation, to the community and get some feedback, I think that there's too many loose ends for anything to be proposed in our municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Sarais. Okay, so I will put that to the vote of what Councillor Sarais moved. All those in favour? All those against? All those in favour? Councillor Sarais, Councillor Gauchimarici, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp. That motion is lost. The next item on the agenda is notices of motion number 2020-11 winter/summer allocation tenants. I'll call on Councillor Sharp to present her notice of motion entitled winter/summer allocation of tenants.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't read that out. I'll just take it that it's as is. But obviously this NRM is pretty obvious, I suppose. Really, I just felt that it was important to get clear guidelines in place for our winter/summer tenant seasons who have all been greatly impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. The words from the notice of motion are taken directly from the AFL-cricket agreement, which was reached recently. There's just some words using summer and winter tenants just so it can apply more appropriately to what we're doing here in our municipality. But it's a fair proposal, it's a fair agreement.
Councillor Sharp, I don't actually have a seconder for your motion.
Oh, sorry.
Or what you've moved. So you're moving. If you can actually just read out what you're moving, and then I'll ask for a seconder. Thank you.
Well, my iPad has gone dead, so I cannot read it because I don't have it. Sorry.
Okay, just hold on one moment. I will get what I think you may be moving, and then you can we can go with that. So, Councillor Sharp, you're moving that you wish to take notice that the council meeting to be held on the 23rd of June 2020, it is my intention to move that 1, the priority use access shall be provided to football leagues, fixtures, competitions up to no later than the following. A, home and away fixtures for seniors and juniors to conclude on or before Sunday the 27th of September. B, finals, brackets or highlighting premierships, bracket, for juniors to conclude on or before Sunday 11th of October, and C, finals fixtures for seniors to conclude on or before Sunday 18th of October. Note, this approach provides the ability for the vast majority of grounds to be transitioned to summer tenant use from the end of September, and then a gradual transitioning of remaining grounds through the finals period. 2, that priority use access shall be provided for cricket allocations to fixtures competitions from no earlier than the following, with play to commence when safe to do so, including ensuring matches do not proceed until pitches are adequately prepared. A, Premier Cricket first and second 11 competition, men and women, Saturday 10th of October. B, junior competitions from Friday 16th of October. And C, all other senior competitions from Friday 23rd of October. Note, where community competitions choose not to commence their seasons or have completed their season by the end of September, summer seasonal tenants shall retain priority flexibility to schedule matches from 1st of October. Now, Councillor Sharp, that was what you were intending on moving?
That's exactly as per the agenda, yes.
Yes. And do I have a seconder for Councillor Sharp's notice of motion? Councillor Sypek. Now, Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak on your notice of motion?
Sorry, my iPad just has 2%, so anyway, sorry. I'll just repeat what I said before. I'm only quick anyway. Obviously, it's pretty obvious NRM, I suppose. Really, I just felt that it was important to set clear guidelines in place for our winter/summer tenants who have all been greatly impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. The words taken for the notice of motion directly from the AFL-cricket agreement, which was reached recently. Obviously, there's just a few words like summer and winter season that have been transposed just to make it more appropriately apply to us. But it is a fair proposal. I believe that it's fair for all clubs and all tenants. And based on the motions earlier tonight, fair is a focus of this council. So if any councillors got any questions, no problems, but I think it's pretty obvious. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to move this notice of motion, but we just must be mindful that this is a very fluid topic right now about allocations. If you have a look in the news today, some of the eastern suburbs football leagues have cancelled their whole seasons. So with with changing of dates from summer to winter sports, this could be all probably irrelevant if Victoria doesn't get over this second wave of infections, because that could probably change the whole situation too. So happy to support at this moment in time as a snapshot, but this is a very fluid issue, so this could change. Everything could change.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, I'm not really taking the Councillor Sypek as opposition, so I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. The next item of business is urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business tonight? No hands go up? Nope. What about delegates report? Does anyone have anything that they wish to report as a delegate? All quiet again. Okay, so the next item of business is confidential reports, and there is a confidential report this evening. Councillors, can I please have a motion that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to allow for consideration of consideration of confidential information under section 3(1)(a), council business information, being information that will prejudice the council's position in the commercial negotiations if prematurely released. Moved Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Sharp. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. So this is where we say a big good night to all of those watching the meeting on the internet. Thank you for your interest in tonight's meeting. Please remember, we'll keep you updated in terms of what council's doing with the coronavirus. As has been mentioned tonight, it's obviously a changing position quite regularly, but please keep washing your hands, keeping socially distanced, and keep on top of the news that is coming out, particularly from DHHS and from state, federal and local governments. Thanks everyone. Good night.